Welcome to the Spirit Pathways podcast. I am Kate Sprickley. Our podcasts offer raw, honest, and authentic conversations on a number of topics that we hope you find informative and inspiring. All right, so it's been a while since I did a last podcast, and I'm excited to have Brett Simpson with me. I've known Brett since he was in his 20s, I think. You came to see me in your 20s in the midst of your Saturn return.
I mentioned you in the workshop, and then I was like 18, 19, 20, more than 20. I'm like, holy shit. Over 20 years, Kate.
It's been a long journey, but it's been a fun one, you know.
I wonder if I'd have walked into your space and understood what it took to get here. If I would have walked in again.
Well, if I remember, your mother booked the appointment for you.
She did.
So,
I spoke to her today.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting considering the Constellation conversation.
Yeah. So Brett's just done the family and systemic constellation training, which I've done twice. So I know the excitement and the sense of expansiveness and I don't know, it's joy, really. I felt an incredible amount of joy after doing those trainings, hence why I did it twice. I couldn't, and I would have done it a third time if I'd been there knowing you were in it, just so I could be a part of watching the unraveling and the coming together. And
I would not have handled, not with you and Richard.
Oh, we would have had fun.
No, I'm joking. That would have been amazing.
So, for those who don't know, family and systemic constellations is a therapeutic process that looks at the hidden dynamics, the unconscious dynamics that are often create shifts, challenges, situations, circumstances in our life that we feel stuck in or feel like we're repeating patterns. It delves into all sorts of areas. Although we call it family constellations, the systemic part means that we can deal with anything, you know, from money issues to relationship issues to physical issues, illnesses, all sorts of things. The family part of it obviously is looking at transgenerational trauma and the burdens that we carry from those that have come before us, and looking at ways to unravel and untangle the energetic dynamics that exist within us that are impacting or impeding our life and our purpose. And it is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I absolutely love this work. It is something that, for me, when I did the training, you know, I've been working in that energetic space, in that morphogenic field for, you know, nearly 20 years by that point. And so stepping into that field in that constellation space just felt so natural, so normal. It was like, I know this space. I know exactly what this feels like. But it was accessing a different layer of it or a different level of it and being shown I think, you know, for me, I've been thinking about it. I think, you know, doing the energy work that I do, it's me doing the work. I do the work for the client. I shift the energies. I clear what needs to be cleared. I untangle what needs to be untangled. But in the constellation space, the client participates. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's such an empowering space for someone to step into, which is what I love, because we're stepping into this time, and we are in these times where we need to be actively participating in our healing. It's not a case of stepping into a space and finding someone who can wave a magic wand and take all our problems away. We have to participate in that. And I think that's what Constellations does. It allows the client to step into that space and to work tangibly with you to clear things, to release things, and to free themselves. And they step out of that space feeling so empowered, mostly.
Lovely word there. Do you know what the blog that I released yesterday was titled?
No, I haven't.
Uh,
I've,
yeah, it's the truth will set you free, but it'll piss you off first. And
well, I
that feels like it's,
noticed
yeah.
you times with a few truths, so yeah.
There's nobody in my world who's pissed me off more than you have, Kate.
And I was so unaware of it. That's what
No,
disturbed.
but also how, and this is the thing watching Richard, the mastery of who he is that is intentionally done, but with a very deep love and empathy and compassion that sits within it. But it doesn't make the sword less sharp when it's like a truth you have to feel and see and experience and reflect and hold and be witnessed in. It's a yeah, it's a it's phew. It's hard to actually sum up in words what happens here, because it feels like certain things that I've been struggling with for so long. Like there's just a immediate, I mean, it's not like things are gone or anything like that, but there's such a, like it's out of the way a bit. So if that's kind of a block represent between me and you and the screen, it's like it sits here now, and clear awareness around it, so so that it doesn't actually affect, because it's almost like a blind spot.
It's in its rightful place,
Mm.
which is not in your way. And you know what I think is so beautiful about constellations, particularly when you do them in a group, is the power of having your process witnessed.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we had 14 people, 12 women and 2 men, and the other man had done it 3 times, Kate. So it's something to be said about Richard. Um, but to be witnessed by a woman in exploring my masculinity in a way, and that is just incredibly empowering, because it's the support that's needed, and that's often left out of the toxic masculinity conversation. You know, it's like being witnessed by people like that is so powerful, men and women. It's like that's, yeah, I mean, it's a big part of the process, isn't it?
And I think you know you bring an important point there. There is a lot of work that men are doing, but with other men.
Mm.
And yes, there is healing in that, and yes, there is a space for that. But I also believe that there is a need for men to be witnessed stepping into that healthy masculine
Mm.
by women. And the support that is needed for that to happen, because it's all well and good to have other men say, "Yeah, you know, go for it. Yes, you're strong. Yes, you're powerful. Yes, you're this. Yes, you're that."
Mm.
But a woman's support is much quieter. It's much gentler. It's much more nurturing of that new space that you're stepping into.
Which is the invitation that's required for men to do as well, is to use that energy within themselves, to awaken that, to connect with it, to express it, to become more of it, or to allow it more, which is, yeah, I suppose it's interesting. Because that particular aspect with majority women was something very significant. It
So
was really cool.
tell me a little bit of how I mean, I know you've just come out of that space, so you're probably still flying quite high and integrating a lot of it. But I'd be interested to know how you are seeing weaving the constellations into the work that you do. Because for those that don't know, Brett, he is a coach working specifically with people that are moving through the cancer journey, whether that is support as they go through their treatments, or support after their treatments, or support as they are moving towards the end of their life.
Mm.
And you also work with men. I know you've got your own men's group that you work with quite a lot. How are you feeling you're going to weave this in?
Sure. Well, first, the effect. I just want to go there, just because it's it'll inform a little bit about how I want to weave it in. Ew. Actually, no. Let me go to that, because that's a tricky question. I just actually set up for myself. Um, I think for me, like constellating the cancer and separating yourself from that, being able to actually witness what is actually happening there that might not have all of your involvement that you've been blaming yourself for and going into a victim mode and therefore disempowered, but being able to have that aspect of yourself removed from you so that you can witness it clearly, if that makes any sense. So for me, there's something around that. I'm not 100% clear, but yeah, in separating those different aspects that are not you, because often, and this is the interesting part of cancer for me, because when people go through it, I mean, it's obviously horrific to hear that, because your subconscious is saying death. Like that is essentially what you're working with, and there's a lot of grief around that. It's grieving what previously was. It's grieving what you lost, as in your health. It's grieving so many other aspects. So yeah, being able to kind of separate from that, because there is what happens is that it becomes part of your identity, and it can actually reinforce victimhood, and it can reinforce that energy around, like, you know, poor me, I'm a victim too. And in fact, it's the reason why I wrote that blog yesterday, was that it was after this, and this is possibly the biggest effect, is me taking ownership of aspects of myself that I haven't been able to, because I haven't been able to see those or experience them or not be overwhelmed within it. So does that make sense, Kate?
Yeah, for me it makes sense. I mean, I think, you know, the important thing is understanding that there are all these different parts of ourselves. You know, if we go into the psychotherapeutic space, you know, you've got the inner child, you've got the inner parent, you've got, and that links into IFS, which is internal family systems, and you start to engage with those different parts of yourself. And an illness is another part of you. And it's a part of you that does need to be looked at, because that disease part is wounded. It's the wound, and it's now manifesting as a physical wound, which does need to be looked at and addressed and constellated, because we can't keep pushing these parts of ourselves away. We can't keep pushing the trauma away. We can't keep pushing the wounding away. We can't keep pushing the pain away, because it actually ultimately manifests in some physical form. For some, it's an illness. For others, it's a physical experience of the loss of a job or a divorce or the death of a partner or whatever it is. You know, these things manifest in our external reality. And until we are able to do the internal work, to face them, to look at them, and to reintegrate them in a healthy way into our system, we can't actually move forward, and we stay in that state of victimhood, and we stay in that space of being disempowered. And I think what Constellations can do for everyone really is give us the opportunity to lay those parts out, you know, whether they are our own internal parts or whether they are the parts that we are entangled with regards to unresolved issues within our family lineages or unresolved issues within our immediate family. When we can separate those out and start to see what is the dynamic, because family constellations looks at the system of the family, the health of the family, and there is an order to that. There is a correct order to that. That is a universal truth. And what's so beautiful about that space of the field and working in and doing a constellation in the field is you see the truth. Like untruths don't land. You can feel it. You say and it's something that's not true in the field. There's no response. It's like a lead brick that lands nowhere. Whereas you say a truth and you speak a truth into that space, and all of a sudden something starts to move and something starts to shift. And when you're doing it in a group situation and you start to watch your life and this aspect of your life start to shift, because there's been an acknowledgement and an acceptance of what has been or what has happened. And mostly that's what people struggle with. They struggle with truly acknowledging their pain, truly acknowledging their suffering, truly acknowledging something that happened that has had a detrimental effect on their life in some way. We deny so much of that because the focus is on, you've got to keep going. You've got to suck it up and you've got to keep moving forward. And in my experience, there always comes a point in someone's life where that just becomes too heavy. Whether it is unresolved issues in a family, whether it is your own unresolved trauma and pain and suffering, whatever it becomes too heavy, and life just becomes harder and harder and harder. And I often find that, the people that come to see me are at that point of saying, yeah, I don't want to live like this anymore. I can't, I just feel this, but I don't know what it is. And the beauty of Constellations is you can just get there straight away. Oh, let's.
It's like, yeah, I mean, I definitely went through therapy. We share somebody who we've both seen and who we both respect massively. And it's amazing being able to talk these things out. But something about Constellations just it gets you to the core essence of it all, and to experience it not from an intellectual perspective, which is where the power of it lies, because you actually get to feel into it and see it from so many different perspectives and be witnessed by it. There's so much going on there that it does feel like almost like 10 years worth of therapy that you can do in one frigging session. And I've done plant medicine, I've done ayahuasca, I've done mushrooms, and they're all those are amazing. It's phenomenal. It's such fascinating and sacred aspects to those, done with the right intention and done in a safe place with powerful and good practitioners. But this, yeah, it's another thing, hey, because it feels like you're so lucid in understanding what's going on as it's evolving, and you're understanding it and you're experiencing it all at the same times. It's not, I'm looking at this memory or this hurt that happened to me so long ago, which, I've done so much work around like this. But it's just that gives you a kind of a stale way, and like the same blocks are there, but this is just something magic happens in it. It's absolutely phenomenal, man.
I mean, I think that, talk therapy is important, and I've always incorporated that into my energy work. I mean, you've experienced it. There's
20 years with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years.
It's important to have that outlet, to get the mind, or allow the mind to have that space. I do
and
believe
to integrate this, probably
Yeah.
that'd be helpful with integrating where I am at the moment, whereas that shift has happened, that like click out of place into place. And then understand how to apply that and how to work with that energy as well, because it brings up different emotions. Like I've had more anger come up in me than I have in a very, very long time, but I'm working with it. I can't believe how well I'm working with it. It's phenomenal.
But it's also
absolutely phenomenal, and that's because of that shift. But understanding how I'm going through it now and how I allow it, and what I do with it, and how do I channel it, and how do I, when I'm in a intimate relationship with somebody, like how do I make sure that I don't express that in the wrong way, which I used to before, and now there's something changed. Something's changed in how I deal with those emotions.
Well, I think also with the constellation, there's a reorganization of your system. There's a reorganization of that mental aspect, of that emotional aspect, of that spiritual aspect, and of that the physical aspect, because there are all these releases. Suddenly, things that were locked in place for sometimes our entire lives are released. There is an opening, and there's new energy available. And that's when we feel that incredible high and that incredible expanse and that beautiful space, because suddenly there's this of energy that we've not had access to before, because it's been used to suppress something, or it's been used to keep something that doesn't want to be seen, or we haven't had the ability or the space, or we haven't had someone in our lives to be able to hold that space for us to be able to access it in a deeper way. And I'm always fascinated when I work on someone, after they've done it, work with them before they've done a constellation from an energetic perspective, and then after the constellation. And there's feeling of space and movement that wasn't necessarily there before.
Well described.
And anger anger is often, particularly in the spiritual space, people don't like anger. I'm being diplomatic there.
You are being very diplomatic, because it is important. It's the one thing that I struggled with when I was look at everything bright and shiny and everything must be good and comfortable and happy and joyful, and the more I've done this work with you, the more I've understood that going into that shadow, going into that difficulty, being unbelievably uncomfortable in those spaces, that's where the gifts lie. That's where the transition or the alchemy exists. And this is something that removes, connects, and opens that up a lot more, which for me is allowing me to feel anger a lot more, because I've had a story around that. Like when I get angry, I hurt, and I hurt people around me. Like that was the story, and very well entrenched in hospital visits when I was 12. And now, there's an allowing of that. And instead of me being scared of it, now I use it to like, okay, cool. And I've noticed myself when I'm communicating something that I'm passionate about, it's just like there's this thing rises in me a lot more than it did, which is awesome. It's beautiful to be able to use that now, but in a way that's helpful and not destructive.
Or a way that's
Which is,
creative rather than destructive.
yeah,
We can use anger creatively, use that energy. We can harness that energy and use it to create rather than destroy.
yeah,
And, that energy, that feeling of anger, is very closely linked to that feeling of creative power. It's almost like
yeah.
they sit next to each other.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other, and that's the other thing that I've learned as well. Like the more I'm able to go into shame, the more that I'm able to own more. The more that I'm able to allow anger, the more that creativity comes through. The more that I allow sadness, the more that joy it has a different texture in my life, and more space and more ease of coming in and leaving for a little while as well. And okay, that whole dynamic is, like the wish-wash. I was just having a chat with my mom today, and yeah, I mean, the thing that, not to go into the detail because it's my mum, but it's like allowing more of those difficult spaces. It gives you that capacity, and that just, your mind is clearer, stomach's not in knots, and better decision making and calmer, like it's not why we do all of this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know me, I love the difficult spaces. I thrive in those difficult spaces, particularly when I'm working with someone who's triggered. And, I will kind of rattle the cage and I will agitate the purpose because I want.
You, oh my God, you too. You are the he she energetically when it comes to that. Hey? You really are. Richard, he looks for it, he finds it, and he hits it, and then he opens it up and works with it beautifully. It's just like, holy crap. And I
Well,
was like, no wonder him and Kate just got so well together, because they do the same thing. They light things up and then they open it.
well, it's
And
also,
it's, getting into the heart so easy because there's that heart behind it.
yeah, because you're not doing it. I mean, I'm not doing it, and I know Richard from that place either. We're not doing it from a malicious place. It's almost like, for me, there's a sense that there is a stuck energy. So what can I do to agitate that stuck energy so that we can see what it is? And
Mm.
sometimes it requires poking the bear. Sometimes it requires pissing someone off. Um,
Yeah.
the amount of times I've said things to you, oblivious, really,
Oblivious.
said to you.
Stop being so. I'm gonna use
Yeah.
our language. Stop being so fucking spiritually naive, Brett. I remember that one when there was a truth that I couldn't digest. But because you say that to me with the love that I know I feel from you, is that you need both of those, and it's really something that I realize that, and that's the thing that I really worked on, was that being able to like very, very clearly come from a heart space, and to be conscious of being in that space, and when I fall into ego, because everyone does, but being able to speak a truth very firmly, without cotton wool, and I'm talking to myself first, and then offering that to other people, because what we allow, what that's the process for me, is having face a lot of those difficult truths myself, and then just chewing on it, until you can just like, it can be easy. Like, I wouldn't have been able to 10 years ago spoken to you about my lean towards alcohol and the addiction that sat within that. And now, because, I'm happy to share it, and I've gone to those places, like now I can speak to it very comfortably and easily, and tell you how I've messed it up, even in the giving up. And, there's an acceptance there that is freeing. It's incredibly freeing, because it just allows, like you said, the stuff in the family, which is the stuff in yourself, and it gets reflected again and again and again. You know, if there's a wounding or a challenge within that space with your mom or your dad and your grandparents, or whatever the energy is coming up, or whatever memory or whatever, like it's reflected in your life, and you have to allow that within your life in order for it to be transmuted or changed or let go or surrendered. But the space that comes within after that, once that's digested, is, it's remarkable.
I think
Absolutely.
what I love about that space is that it's not a place of acceptance of like, oh, well, this is just who I am, or this is just how it is.
No, not the pissy little brat, because I'm very aware of that when that comes up in me. It's just like, it's like a fight with your partner. This is just me. And it's just like, okay, well, there's a little bit of lack of ownership going on there.
But when you in the constellation space and you reach that place of true acceptance, you
yeah,
tap into
that thing, Kate, that thing.
well, what you're tapping into actually, and this is the powerful bit, is you tapping into the fact that everything is done from a place of love. Like even the pain and the trauma that we have allowed from, perhaps childhood, from, for me, it's been, I've the challenges in my family literally started the day I was born. And I allowed those unconsciously, maybe, but I allowed them because of the love that I have for my family.
Yeah.
I agreed to take on these challenges and these burdens and agreed to be who I was in the family dynamic because I loved them, because I wanted them to feel better. And when you reach that place of acceptance and you tap into that love that we have, that's where the power is, because it's like you realize how big our hearts are. You realize how much we feel for not just ourselves, but for our family. And you could, move that outwards. I mean, I've tapped into that feeling of just how much I love humanity. And people that know me laugh often because, I'll say, well, I just want to go and live on an island in the middle of nowhere in a forest.
Where are you living?
Yeah, exactly. An island in the middle of nowhere in a forest. I've got good internet, which is one of the things for.
Oh, goodness.
But so people laugh because I've got that contradiction going on. But actually, when I tap, there's just this huge love that is there. All have that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I mean, just I look as a youngster and how, like, I used to perceive my dad, and he was a father and he was strict and he was and now, having gone through the constellation and worked through aspects of my relationship and witnessed what his relationship would have been with his father and all of that, and it went from like a level of anxiety and blaming and shaming and judgment into just going like, yes, I could be dad in the world. Like, flaws and all that aspect, and seeing him in a different light, that makes me see like like how he changed the stars of his upbringing for me, and like how far across that continuum he actually moved. And I'd never seen that before. I'd never been open to it because I had a fixed perspective and I had a fixed way of looking at it, which I think most of us do. But to be able to sidestep that, and again, that image for me is like there. It just gives it like the most beautiful perspective, and that's when then the heart comes in, and then the heart goes, it's just like, wow, okay. There's no one to blame here. There's no antagonizer. There's no what is it, persecutor or whatever it is. There's just these people doing the best that they damn well can, being human in environments that are often unhealthy. And what happens in unhealthy environments? People get wounded and they come out swinging. It's so, it's magnificent. I see how, because I remember sitting with you 2 or 3 years ago in Constantia here in Cape Town, and you were telling me like, I met this Richard guy, and you're like a 13-year-old girl, just so excited. It was ridiculous. And I remember going like, wow, like, because you're the most steadfast person and you're cynical in the best possible way around like bullshit. And there's good practitioners and there's other practitioners who are not there yet. And when you spoke about it, I was just like, sure. And it took me 5 connections in order for me to actually go and see Richard. And and understanding his passion for this and your passion for it, it's like, this is the thing that could change things quickly. Like, it literally is. It'll change things very quickly.
Well, I mean, I think I first went to Richard 10 years ago, maybe.
Oh, seriously?
But I had his number for 3 years before that.
That was 3 too.
Yeah. Took me 3 years to get there. And, people had always spoken about family constellations. Oh, yeah, whatever. And I knew that it was linked into ancestral work. And I think...
And that's your passion as well?
Yeah, but for a long time, I was pretty pissed off with my ancestors.
Well, that's your work.
Had a wall when I was younger. In fact, when I was married, I had all these black and white photographs of going back a couple of generations, all my family. And I had this wall of all my ancestors, and I hadn't done it consciously of like an honoring. I just, I think it was when my kids were born. I wanted them to know where they came from. I wanted them to be able to, have a visual picture of where they came from. And I remember at some point walking up to that wall and going, fuck you. This is all your fault. Everything I'm going through is your fault. And I took
right
down and I packed them in a box and I said, I'm done with you. And I resisted the ancestral stuff. I resisted so badly because of my own issues with my own ancestors. And I know a lot about my family ancestry. I was always fascinated by it as a child. So I asked one grandmother, asked her hundreds of questions and got all the stories that I could possibly get out of her. And I've delved into the other side of the family too. And, so I knew a lot. I knew what they had gone through. I knew what they had endured. And yeah, I had this deep knowing that a lot of the stuff that I was being challenged by was as a result of the stuff that I was entangled with with them. There was unresolved trauma, there was unresolved pain, and now I initially thought it was my mother's side of the family that was the most fucked up.
I was gonna wait to see if that'd be authenticity code.
Yeah, well, it's a good word to use.
I don't know why you were holding that in for so long.
Learning if there was a better one, but there isn't.
No.
And I've now, in moving to Canada and reconnecting with my roots here, have realized that the trauma on this side of the family is massive. It links to the Indigenous people and the First Nations and what they suffered here. And I'll share a little bit about what I discovered. And it was prompted by a constellation that I did with Richard after my brother died. So for those who don't know, my brother took his own life in 2020, and he was my younger brother. I was 7 years older than him, and he was living in the UK at the time. I was in South Africa at the time. So it was an incredibly shocking for me experience, because I'd never thought that he'd do that. I knew he was struggling, but he had 3 children, and I just never thought he'd leave them. He did. And although I have this deep understanding of death, like I get it. And in the constellation space, I've been a representative for death and I've been a representative for life. And in that space, death is way better. Just have you know, it feels beautiful. It's expansive. It's huge. It's filled with joy. Life feels pretty heavy, constricted, and small in comparison. And so I have this deep understanding, like, you know, people die. It's great, fantastic. Let's celebrate their life. Let's celebrate their death rather than mourn it. And yet I went through this. It was really weird because I had this deep understanding of death, and yet I was feeling all of these intense emotions around the loss of my brother. And I was trying to reconcile these two parts of part of me, that spiritual part that has this bigger perspective and this deeper understanding, and this human part that was really grappling with the emotions and the depth of grief. And I think, you know, I've obviously gone into it all and uncovered what it truly was about, and what it was is, you know, death really should be an incredibly beautiful and peaceful place for people to exit. And for my brother, it wasn't. You know, he was in such turmoil that he did something to himself so dramatically that reflected his pain. And that's, I think, what the grief was, is that he died in that way. You know, if he had died from an illness, or he had died in an accident or whatever, it would have been, I possibly would have had different feelings around it. Suicide is a different kind of feeling, a different kind of grief. And when I came back from the UK after sorting out his funeral and all of that, I immediately went to Richard. And I said to him, you know, the three of us in the family, I'm the eldest, then I've got another brother in Australia, and then I've got obviously the younger brother. And I said to Richard, I feel like a three-legged stool that's lost a leg. You know, I'm so unbalanced that I can't find my center. You know, please, let's constellate this. And obviously my brother just died, really. So Richard wasn't too keen on tapping into his energy, which I didn't actually need him to, because I already could feel my brother. I'd already had a lot of conversations with him, mostly with me shouting at him and telling him he was a fucking asshole. But what was interesting is that I immediately sat down and Richard said to me, you didn't tell me you had mixed blood. I was like, how is that relevant right now? This is not what I came for. Anyway, we went into it and I explained that my Canadian side of the family, there was this, you know, suspicion that there was Indigenous blood, but we couldn't really confirm it because, you know, no one in those days, no one spoke about it. Anyway, he through the constellation, it turns out that this is something, a deep wound in the family that needs to be resolved. And so, of course, it's on me to do that. Hence why I'm sitting in Canada currently. And so the journey, you know, my dad and I have taken a journey to go back to where the family come from in Canada, and to research into discovering who these ancestors were and what was going on. And when I was in Cape Town, so we got all the information. We realized that my great grandmother had been in a residential school and had fallen pregnant with my great grandmother. She'd obviously, possibly been raped in that space by whoever at the residential school, and had this child that was then given to a white family to be brought up. So my great grandmother grew up as white, and there was no acknowledgement of her Indigenous heritage. There was no acknowledgement of her being First Nations at all. And her husband, my great grandfather, was a Christian minister, and was deeply entrenched in those beliefs, Christian beliefs. Was an incredible man. He did incredible work. I won't go into the history of that because it might be a little bit triggering for people. But they moved to Israel, and there was a lot of stuff that went on there. And now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. So when I was in Cape Town last, and Richard and I, since I discovered all of the stuff about my great-grandparents and my great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, Richard and I have tried to do one-on-one sessions to unravel this, to untangle this, to get not just me free of it, but all the women in my family, because it's playing out. It's in different ways. It's playing out in all of us. And from the moment my children, my eldest daughter was born, I was like adamant that this stuff, I didn't even know at that point. I mean, I was 25 years old. I knew nothing then. At that point, I didn't know, but I made a vow that whatever I was carrying was not going to be passed on to my kids. And so part of a lot of the work that I've been doing on myself is to make sure that my children don't suffer as a result of the unresolved shit in the families. Sadly, they also have a father where there's stuff there, so it's on them. But I'll do what I can from my side. And Richard and I have kept trying to do this constellation with the great grandparents. We just couldn't do it. We get so far, and then they just couldn't do it. So when I came to Cape Town last, I heard that Richard was doing a group constellation on the one Sunday. And I messaged him and said, I need to be there. I need to constellate my great-grandparents. Of course, it was full. But of course, I bullied my way in there, was adamant, Rich, I'm sorry, I need to do it. And anyway, so went and we did the constellation. Obviously, it's a group constellation. I'm not part of it. I'm watching. And it took a long time to us to get to the root of what was actually going on. What was the damage? What was the wound? Like initially, I thought it was the rape that had happened with my great-great-grandmother, but it wasn't. And eventually we got to this point where we realized that the damage was my great-grandfather and his belief that the First Nations were evil, that their spirituality was evil. And so there was this war happening internally between these two parts of my family, this indigenous part and the white Christian part. And he believed it was evil, so he was fighting the devil, which is not. And I've studied Native American shamanism, and I've gone into all that stuff and followed the Red Road for many years, and so I understand what their spirituality is in a real way. So I know it's not evil. I know how incredibly beautiful and honoring it is of everything and of life and the interconnectedness of life. And I had been in chronic pain for 10 years. I had issues.
Back.
Yeah, well, it originally started with I dislocated my pelvis. It wasn't picked up for 3.5 years. Because I was only 40 at the time, no one thought to look at a dislocated pelvis in a 40-year-old. They all had just assumed it was my back. Anyway, eventually it was picked up, but as a result of walking around with that dislocated pelvis, I lived in chronic pain, and I'd done everything to try and fix it. Everything from crystal healing to energy work to screaming at the universe to meditating, trying to meditate my way through it, to chiropractors, physios, anything. I mean, people used to say, have you tried this? And I'd say no, and I'd say, give me the number, and off I'd go. Nothing worked. And it was all on my right side. So I knew it was linked to the masculine, and people used to say to me, oh yeah, but it's because you're not feeling supported by the masculine. I was like, fuck, it's not that. And then they'd throw Louise Hay at me, and I'd be like, it's not that. And so we did this constellation, and the representative in the field is in pain. I mean, she's like holding her hip and her whatever back and saying, oh, I'm in so much pain.
That's crazy, yeah.
It's funny watching yourself in the field, eh?
It's unbelievable. And the emotion, the deep, authentic emotions that come up in you as that person is going through whatever they're going through.
I have to say I did laugh because I was like, yep, that is so me. Because it's so me. And and behind me is all this freaking intensity between my great grandparents going on, and I'm in the direct line of whatever my great grandma is carrying. And yeah, it turns out that it was this kind of spiritual war that was happening between my great grandfather and not my great grandmother, but that indigenous part of her. And it was so incredible how eventually he was able to see that what he was doing was creating damage in and he said it's been 4 generations. This has been going on for 4 generations. And eventually he kind of put it all down and was able to stand with the First Nations people and to be able to accept that, the field, what I love about the field is we don't look for forgiveness in the space. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about the acceptance, the true acceptance of that part of his wife and that us as future generations, and then embracing an acceptance of that and being able to then stand with that part of the family and this reunification, and my pain was gone. I mean, that's in fucking 10 years, and that's all it took.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of so many things that came up during the week.
Well, one of the things that was so
That were
interesting,
like that, like 30 of them.
What was so interesting in this, after we constellated that, Richard actually took a moment to just chat to everyone and explained how enormous that constellation is, because that's my family story, but it is the family story of hundreds, if not millions, of people.
Yeah.
Because
and that
have been targeted or suppressed or demonized for, I don't know, ever. So it was a healing and a resolution for not just my family, but for, the collective too, which is incredibly powerful. And I think that this is where there's another level to constellations that we don't often talk about, is that when we heal those stories within ourselves or with those stories within our family, we're not just creating that healing for ourselves, we're creating that healing for the collective. We're creating that healing for those 7 generations that come before us and the 7 generations that come after us. And there's a ripple effect. It's not, it happens, there's this unraveling in us, there's this healing that is happening in us, but it ripples out because your story is going to be so similar to other people's story. My story is so similar to other people's story. It's not just the indigenous stuff that is relevant. I mean, my brother's suicide, how many men, especially these days, are taking their own lives. There are themes to these stories that can be tapped into in so many different ways, in so many different families.
Sure. And I found, even, I don't know if it was the same in your training, Kate, but there's that, and then there's also you representing other aspects for other people, and the stuff that happens there. Like there was victim in, I suppose, the work that I was doing for myself and my family, and then I got to play savior, and then I got to play perpetrator, and within 24 hours I was playing exactly the role of each of those parties that I'd kind of assigned those to. So I felt it in different aspects as well. Like that other person gifted me an experience that healed an aspect of what I was working with. I was supporting them, I was representing, but it happened within me as well. And yeah, I mean, that for me was an unbelievable experience in representation as well, because not only just doing your constellation, and obviously it's very difficult to describe, what that experience is like. And, like we're trying to do here, trying to kind of give voice to the impact and the power of it. But yeah, being in different perspectives of other people's stories is that what you speak of. it's this collective thing that works, because there's like, I'm supporting them and they're supporting me and mine, and there's this connectedness that then happens. And Richard was actually really, at the beginning of the 5-day, like, you're strangers now, but you'll be family by the end of it. And you were just like, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like I've got 12 new sisters in a row.
Mm.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing that, Kate. It's was that before you did the training?
No, that was now, this year, beginning of this year.
That was this year. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was this year. And it's been interesting to because you come out of a constellation, and sometimes there's an immediate shift. For you personally, there may be an immediate shift, but it can take time for that ripple to happen into the rest of the family, into the rest of the family system.
Oh.
It's been interesting to watch and observe my family, to see what has shifted in them, what is changing in them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had an instantaneous change in that
yeah.
space. Oh.
Yeah, I've had an instantaneous change in almost every constellation I've ever done for myself. But this one, I'm interested, because the impact was so huge. I'm interested to see the effect on my father and his siblings and my cousin and my children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are these 3 generations that I can look at.
Yeah. And that you can influence.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm watching my cousins all. There's definitely something happening. I can't put words to it yet. But there's movement. There's lots of movement, which I think is initially uncomfortable, but ultimately is leading them all to experience life in a different way. And I think that's the key. Is you need to experience life in a different way, and the times that we're in now. I mean, I write a daily inspiration, or have been writing a daily inspiration for 4 years, just giving people insight and guidance into the energies and what's happening. I'm taking a break from that for a while, but everything I'm saying, it's all about shifting consciousness, how we're needing to heal, how we're needing to grow, how we're needing to do things differently, how we're needing to let go of and clear the past. And I often say to people, when I talk about the past, not just your past, it's the past. We need to let go of the patterns and the programming and the conditioning of the past, so that we don't recreate it and repeat it moving forward, because we can't anymore. So this ancestral work and all this work of clearing and untangling the dynamics that create the pain and the suffering and the wounding and the re-traumaing and the whatever, that all needs to be worked through and released. And I think that moving forward, things like family and systemic constellations, ancestral work, is all going to become more and more and more important, because for those of us that have been working on ourselves for 20, 30 years, what's next? What is the next step for us to do? It's that. When we've cleared enough of our own stuff to not repeat our own patterns, we then have to look at the deeper patterns that come from previous generations.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I'm actually a skeptic, experimental skeptic. That stuff, I mean, the more that I realize and understand my father, the more that I understand my mother, the more that I understand that stuff and how it affects and influences me, and how I show up differently without that, and how they can do the same.
Mm.
And it's just, I laugh because there was one amazing woman at the beginning. She's like, I find this all very woo-woo. And by the end, she was like, woo!
Embracing the woo.
Oh my word, it was amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's hard to put into words. It's really, really hard to put into words. If there's anything that I would recommend people to do Yeah, and I'm an experimenter. I try everything, from plant medicine to talk therapy to this somatic thing to this TRE to flipping body talk to tapping to all of it. This is the one. This is if anybody's wanting to kind of really connect into one thing and they're kind of exploring it, this is the one that will short circuit a lot of time
A
in
lot
other
of,
areas that are impactful, but not to the degree to which this is.
well, I think that I like you have explored many paths to healing. I haven't done plant medicine, and I don't think that that's a path I will ever take, just because I'm not sure I'll ever come back from it.
Live there half the time anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I don't need something to get me to that state of.
It's like, really, this is my day to day. This is average Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then I poke in through mushrooms. I'm like, holy crap, is this a shit that you see?
Maybe that's it. Maybe, I think the plant medicine would take me there and keep me there forever. Whereas to
Don't
be,
need that.
I
You
need to,
came here for a reason.
yeah, exactly.
Fun.
Um, but I've tried all sorts of things, and always in the hopes of being able to nail down what are those core things that are keeping me stuck? What are those core things that are getting in my way?
Yeah. And you find those, and those become the theme, the topic for 10 years through everything. The amount of times I've gone to like the intention in this journey or a talk therapy theme that I'm working on in the year, like it's all this. Like you find it and then it's there. And like you said earlier, what the hell do you do with it now?
Yeah.
This. I sound this sounds like an infomercial in marketing, but it's like it's genuine.
Well, I think that.
I think I've referred like 4 people to Richard within 48 hours.
Oh, yeah. No, I
Because
can't.
and I'm selfish. It's for me. It's not for the like. Well, it is for them, but it's like for me as well. It's just like, sure, man. Like this is the conversations I can have with you after this is going to be amazing.
I've referred, I don't know how many people to Richard. I think most of my family in South Africa have been to see.
Oh my God, I'm going to end up like that.
Yeah, even my children and their partners. Um,
Wow, I got this around.
no. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the one thing I've actually said to my kids, because they went, my eldest daughter, I picked her up afterwards and I said, how was it? And she said, I think I'm traumatized.
Ask her again in a year or two.
No, but what was so funny is that she was traumatized. She said, I think I'm traumatized. I'm incredibly angry with you for making me do this. I'm like, I didn't make you do nothing. I just suggested it and you said, okay. Anyway, she was very funny and she is just like me. So take that into
Feisty and fireful.
account. But about 3 days later, she phoned me and she said, I feel different. I can't, I think this thing worked. And I'm like, yeah, you think? And 2 weeks later, she phoned me and she said, I phoned you and told you that it was different. It's still different, Mom. I still feel different. I still feel that lightness and I still feel that space. Like, great. She referred, I don't know how many of her mates to go and have sessions with Richard. Yeah. So she's on that bandwagon. But one of the things I've said to them recently is they went a couple of years ago now, and I've said to them, Constellations is not something that is a one-off. I don't think that just because you've gone once and you've dealt with your mother and your father, and I hate to think what they dealt with me, but just because you dealt with me and your father doesn't mean that it's done. There are deeper things beyond just your parents that you still need to perhaps look at and heal yourself from.
I
So
mean, I don't know that truth yet, so that'll be interesting down the line.
Yeah, please go again, because you
No,
really,
I won't.
you know,
Yeah, I
he,
mean, I'm inspired to actually go to him once every month or once every 2 months, budget dependent, just to kind of just to learn from him as well. But besides that, just to see like, you know, what can this really do if you give it more space?
yeah. Well, I mean, the first time I went to Richard, which was many years ago now, he told me not to come back for 6 months, because I did say, when can I come back? He was like, I'll give it about 6 months. It's like, really? That's unusual. But the space that we're in right now, 6 months, not necessary. I'm working with people. We're doing constellations once a month, every couple of weeks. Because what I'm finding with people is that we do one constellation and it peels back a layer,
Mm,
and then something else emerges.
mm,
And it peels that, then we've got to peel that layer, and then something else emerges, and there's another layer. And you just keep going until you start peeling all these layers away. And some of these people, they're kind of new to they're still young, in their 20s and early 30s. So they're at the beginning of their journey, of that healing journey. So there are a lot of layers still to peel away.
mm,
Whereas I've got other people who've been on a journey for 20, 30 years. And so they've already done all of that outside peeling. And now we get
mm,
roots and the core of things
mm.
is, sure, life changing, life changing. But it's an exciting journey that I'm so fucking happy that you did it. I am so excited to see what
Me
you.
too. Yeah, no, I'm very curious as well because it just felt natural in one aspect, and obviously another aspect, I was crapping myself all 5 days, with moments of not. But yeah, it just boggles the mind. It's hard to find words.
It is hard. It's not a space that you can describe. It's a space that you have to feel, because it is a feeling.
Yeah,
Everything
yeah,
installation space is a feeling. It's a feeling.
yeah. But that's the thing as well. It's like constantly for me, especially in my work, you know, when you go through that process, like you only know when you know, like a convert, which we both know and love, uses it around cancer. It's Harry Potter. So you're a muggle when you haven't gone opened that kind of Pandora's box of your shadow or your family shadow and all that kind of stuff. But when you go through the cancer, you have to go into those spaces. You don't have an option or a choice. But he says you come out the other side a wizard because you've learned all of that. Um, you've learned about who you are. And this, yeah, and there's such, yeah, I forget where I was going with that.
Yeah, it's so.
But yeah,
It,
it's like wizard training.
mm, mm, mm. And I'm fascinated also to unpack this with people who are not as experienced with energy. Yeah, I mean, I remember saying to Richard after I'd done the first training, going to see him and saying, "I think I'm doing it wrong. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm doing it wrong." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, it's too easy." And he just roared with laughter and said to me, "Kate, like, you were born to do this work. You've been doing this work just in a different way. It's going to be easy. Just get on with it and do it."
Yeah, well, it's not attached to you because you're just allowing a space. You're facilitating a space more than you're engineering anything. Well, that's it. Like you're connecting them to the space and you into the space and observing what happens and reflecting. It's less. Yeah, I find it's less me in the room and my ego sits to the side. And it feels like when I write those blogs, I start with one idea. By the time I'm finished, I look at that thing and I'm going like, I had no idea that shit was going to come out. I shit myself every single time I share those things because they end up being so like vulnerable. I'm speaking about my addictions and all sorts of shit. But it's like there's something that comes through, and it's it's stepping out of the side and allowing that to come through. And I suppose
But
that
it's
seems.
that authenticity
And
that
you've
is,
been working with connecting with that energy for so long now. I'm like, sure, that's your world.
but it's also, it's also that willingness to be in that space of authenticity. Because
Mm.
as a facilitator, you also have to allow that vulnerable space. You have to allow that.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. On the last day, no, it was on the fourth day after I had my process on the third day. I felt like I'd earned my right to be in that space, and I think you have to be in that space to be able to do this work. Does that make sense?
I mean, I in both trainings, I kind of, no, maybe it was only the second one. I kind of sat in a corner. It felt like I was sitting in a corner. But I mean, I sit and I just weep through every constellation. I mean, I'm sitting there. The constellations are happening.
I so want to come to a constellation with you. When you're down, we're going to one of the good worlds and we're going together.
But and people afterwards are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I'm just weeping for the collective. I'm weeping out of here. But it's that space, you're so open to those feelings and to those emotions, and when you feel that essence of love that underpins all of it. I mean, that's actually what I'm crying about, is that
Yeah,
love that exists.
getting closer to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing that makes it interesting, because I will so focused on the intellectual stuff and understanding things and working through things. And I find I struggle with myself when I'm feeling emotions, but I don't understand what they are, what they're pointing to, or what they're trying to reveal to me or show to me. And this is the thing, it's just like your intellect goes there, boom, and then you're just in the experience of it. And that's where the magic happens. And that's why I think it's very hard to find the words, because it's not an intellectual healing or process. It's a energetic and emotional. And even, I mean, I follow the work of Susan Davids and Mark Brackness, all about emotions and emotional intelligence and emotional agility and how we access that, and how we do that in corporates and stuff. But it's all allowing the feeling. I mean, just if you look at that aspect only within your own constellation, is allowing all of those feelings when you're in that space, and representing even more so powerfully, because you just like, it's like you're in it. It's in you, you're in it. It's like, it's not an intellectual thing. There's nothing intellectual about it.
And it's not about the story.
Yeah.
And that's what is so beautiful. The field doesn't give a shit about your story. It doesn't care how you got here or what happened or what the trauma actually was. It's like, this is the knot in the family system. We just want to unravel it. We don't care how that knot got there. We just want to look at that knot, acknowledge it exists, acknowledge the feelings that are trapped within it, the people that are trapped within it, and free everyone from it. Whereas in talk therapy and most of the other therapies, it's all about the story. How did you get here? How did you determine that this was your feeling? How did you it's like, you feel the feeling, and then you've got to go now and delve into, okay, well, what is this feeling and where does it come from and why? No, just let's get to the knot. Let's get to that, and let's free it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting effect that I've had after my constellation and the training, is that I'm able to go to different feelings without attaching to the stories, and there's a looseness to the stories that were associated with it. And I find myself very habitually, when I felt shame, all of the stories of shame came up in my past, and there was a tight bond to that. And the effect now for me is that there's a disconnect or disassociation, or a more like more looser connection to that, so that there's this pause moment of where you can just go like, oh, this is what's happening here. So it gives you that breath that then changes everything, because then you don't get pulled by that, and you don't, yeah, I mean, I had a session, therapy session, and I was able to go to all different emotion and places, and it just walked out of there just going like, I didn't feel sad, didn't feel happy. I just felt warm and I felt open and calm, because I was able to explore all of these different states and feelings and things like that. And like that is phenomenal in everyday living, in decision making, in difficult relationships and good relationships, and all of it. It's just having that objectivity. And for me, that's what happened for me. Like that's the biggest thing. It's the biggest gift.
And now you can let go of all of those stories.
Yeah, because you can see them outside of the emotion, and the emotion can be felt. Like for me, there's a permission to feel it without association of anything of what that might bring up. Like that's very, there's a massive shift there now.
Oh, that's good. Very, very exciting. And I look forward to being in the field with you to see what we can have. I do find
We
it.
wanted to work together, didn't we? Yeah.
Maybe this is how we're going to do it.
Okay.
I have to bring you to North America so that you can do some stuff here with me. I'll come to Cape Town and we can fiddle around and play with.
Oh well.
But
my partner's American. I'm there once a year. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, there's lots to work with here.
Thanks, Annie.
Well, thank you, and thank you for making
No.
And yeah.
Yeah, but I would never have gotten to this point and in this place and in this level of kind of. Somebody said in a workshop the other day, like, I asked how you feeling after a big process that he went through, and he was like, I feel okay. And I was like, and he said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I feel okay. Like, that's different. That's amazing. I feel okay. And I'm like, holy shit. That's powerful. That's powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Well,
All the shit you've given me, the love you've given me, the support, the patience.
The prodding and the pushing and bullying.
Yes.
You are a stubborn fucker because you don't listen to me sometimes.
Well, why do you think you remember?
Listen to me, but it takes you
Well,
to fight me first.
I'd forgotten about that. I remember I was like, fuck you. And for 2 years, I didn't come and see you. And then I came back with my head down and my shoulders round, and I'm like, yeah, you were right. But don't you fucking start telling me what to do again.
I remember you telling me how upset you that you hadn't come to see me for 2 years. And I was like, shit, really? I didn't even know.
Thanks.
That's how I've learned not to take it personally.
Well done. Great progress. I was the Marine with you that whole time.
Oh, it couldn't have been that bad. Otherwise, I would have felt it.
No, that's exactly what I needed. I was stuck in the victim mode. In many different occasions, even on the collaboration when we were speaking about like the men's work, like it was this beautiful gift in that friction of stubborn versus stubborn, and yeah, I think that's what a teacher is. I think that's what these sorts of relationships are gifts in. That's what I see in Richard. It's just like there has to be that tension. It can't be rainbows and sunshine and rainbows and love and light. Like you can get your ass smashed. And rather with somebody who's loving and caring, who's holding you to that rather than your physical body, because that's less cancer. That's where that kind of shit comes from in my experience.
Well, I think also, it comes from that place of love. It doesn't come out of that place of ego. And the fact that we have been able to have those tussles, but move past them and see them for what they truly were, rather than stuck in,
the story of them, and the wounding of them.
Because they weren't wounding; they were just like realizations and openings. And
no, I mean, I was stuck in my wounding when I was the Marine with you because I couldn't see an aspect of that I was comfortable in digesting.
Yeah.
And that was the gift, because then I'm asking myself the questions afterwards. Just be like, why the fuck? Why do I get so angry? And then you're like, oh, that's where my blog comes in.
To read.
The truth will set you free, and it will piss you off first.
Well, thank you so much for making the time, and I'll leave some links for everyone to be able to go and look at your website and read your very entertaining blogs. They are. I laugh every time because I can actually hear your voice when I'm reading it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate.
Chat soon.